Okay, so to start off, let's start off with your guys' questions. So go ahead.
So why do you feel the only way to achieve success in American society is to commit crimes?
Okay, so when I talked about crime in the Matrix of Domination, I focused on gang involvement, and a lot of kids I found resort to joining gangs because they feel alienated due to whether it's like a language barrier, or a lot of kids get picked on because of the model minority myth, people thinking that they know everything, they're smart, they're taking our jobs, whatnot. And so they resort to joining a gang, which makes them sometimes be involved in violent activities or such. And so I feel like that's why a lot of them.
And then why, like, when they're committed in the communities and stuff, why are they not reported? Like, why aren't the people doing anything about it?
So a lot of crime goes unreported amongst Asian communities. I think due to just family loyalty, and not wanting to have to deal with police, because I feel like a lot of Asian people may feel like they've been talked down to or misunderstood due to language barriers and different things like that. And just there's a lot of loyalty, I feel, from what I've read, that happens to where they feel like um, they can't talk about it, especially with domestic violence and things like that. Like women, a lot of times won't report certain things just because they feel like men are supposed to be like higher in position than they are in terms of things like that.
Okay. And then why do U.S.-born Asian Americans have higher suicidal rates than just the general U.S. population?
So what I found was that the suicide rate was very high because of the fact that they feel so pushed off and kind of forgotten. A lot of people feel like they're either held to such a high standard that they can't live up to that, and if they fall below that, then there's like no other option. They're just failures, or people don't know how to cope with the stress of coming here, not knowing the language, not knowing anybody. They're like often forced into live in like Chinatowns or things like that. So they're not getting a lot of contact with other people, and so I that the from the research that I read, it talked a lot about that being a big aspect in suicide rates.
Cool.
Zika.
Yeah, and I was wondering, like, with the Chinese population, why were Americans trying to keep them out during the Elimination Act?
So, because a lot of Asian Americans started coming over because of the gold rush, people felt like, well, first was like, you're taking away our gold, and then you're taking away our jobs, because then labor was looked for, and so I think people were just threatened by presence of unknown people of whatever sort.
Okay. I was wondering, why was there an increase in discrimination among Asian Americans during right after 9/11?
Right after 9/11?
Yeah.
Did the website talk about that? I think. Or do you mean 9/11 or World War II?
I think it was 9/11.
Okay. Okay, so I think after 9/11, like all minorities started to get discriminated against, just because it was a minority that had attacked us in like the world's eyes, and so like if you feel threatened by just one minority, I think people start to question others, you know. So I think that had a lot to do with it.
Okay. And then I was wondering, how do positive stereotypes become negative? Because it's like someone saying, like, oh, you're good at math. How could that be thought of as negative?
With the model minority myth, I think because people, I don't think it's more of like a, oh, you're good at math, and it's like you're like so good at math that you can do whatever you want type thing. And so I think it quickly turns into a threat comes from the stereotyping. So people start to think that they know everything, They can take your job for whatever reason, because they're smarter, they have a better advantage. Some can speak a different language, they have that, and so I think it just can turn into a threat. Or, like I said, kids feel held to a certain level, to where that when they fall below that, they feel so significantly bad that it affects them to the point where they feel like they need to commit suicide. Is it going to keep recording if it does that? Okay. All right. So I just wanted to go over some of the teachings that we learned, and with one in specific. Sorry, just let me get there. Okay, so one of the things we talked about was our ethnic conflict, and in my website I talked about a conflict being suicide because there were such significant numbers in it, and it is a problem. And one of the ways we talked about to solve like some types of ethnic conflicts or discrimination is called contact hypothesis, and it's the idea that different races need to have contact between one another to get experience with the other. So, like, if you guys have ever seen Remember the Titans, that whole situation was contact hypothesis because the black kids and the white kids didn't want to talk, but once they started to have, like, interactions with one another, they realized, you come to, like, a realization, like, they're human, they're just like me, or, you know, they're just like us, there's nothing wrong with them. And so we just learned about how that can really change people's thinking, and from what I've learned, I feel like it's the easiest, quickest way to get rid of discrimination, because you are seeing that someone is human, and you are recognizing that they are like you. And so that was one thing that I really thought was cool. And in mine, we had to develop a situation where we could use contact hypothesis, and I said, like, the Pathways programs are really good because that gets you helping people who don't speak English. You get to make a friend, and you can build relationships off of that, and so I just thought it would be something cool to help those, like, if you involved Asian Americans and everyone else in doing it, you could just bring more people out of their shell to the community and helping. And then another theory we talked about was the matrix of domination, and these are the systems of inequality that are interconnected, that contribute to the inequality and discrimination in an ethnicity, in a certain ethnicity. And so each institution, so like residential segregation, which is like housing, environment, in workplace, crime, then you have media, and it can go to like religion, different things like that. So all of these are different institutions in which an ethnicity might struggle. Does that make sense? Okay, you guys can stop me if you need me to explain anything. And so now I want to talk to you guys about my ethnicity and how it has struggled through this. So Asian Americans have pretty much struggled since they've come here, from what you probably read on the website. And I think that with housing segregation, any minority pretty much gets discriminated against with housing segregation, just because I think people think a lot of problems can come from minorities, whether it's like they speak a different language or different standards, different things like that. And when you talk about environment and workplace, a lot of people think that like Asians are stealing their jobs because they are like the model minority myth and all of that. My research found that their wages are significantly different. They're lower than most, than other minorities and other, like, Americans, I guess you could say. and it talked about how health is a key issue that affects Asian American workers. Sorry. So when you're poor, basically, because poverty is higher for a minority, your health declines because, like, if you can't afford to pay for your health, then it's not going to be that good. And so they get discriminated against those ways too. And with Asian Americans, any kind of discrimination goes highly unreported. And so it's like when we don't tell anyone, it's going to keep happening because people don't know about it. And along with that, the model minority myth takes away from real issues that are happening. So a lot of people think, this is like what we talked about with your question on stereotyping. A lot of people think like Asians are so good at everything. They, they're so intelligent, they're so smart, they can get whatever they want, opportunities. But really, it takes away from issues like suicide and domestic violence, things like that a lot of people don't know about because they think like, oh, Asians are so smart and they're all mathematicians or doctors or whatever. And so that's an issue in itself that contributes to them because people don't see what's really happening. So we're not able to help when you don't know. And then crime as an institution, and we talked about how gang violence is related to that in any kind of crime. In the media, I thought this was a really interesting section. So the media can, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry. It can have a good and bad effect on different minorities. When you think about it, like, when's the last time you saw an Asian in the media?
Yes, not very often.
Not very often. And when you do, usually how are they portrayed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting because it's like, thinking about it, they're not in the media all that often, and when they are, you definitely, like, Grey's Anatomy, the Asian lady's, like, top surgeon, like, so smart, gets whatever she wants, and so it's kind of interesting. So I think that definitely plays into it, because what we learned about media is that you start looking at media when you're a young kid watching TV, and so if people don't come in contact with, like, minorities, the only basis of knowledge they're going to have is from other sources, such as media, that they've seen. So it's like, your first, like, if what you truly think about an Asian person could be completely false because it's coming from the media, which I found really interesting. But then it can have good effects because, obviously, like, if, like, documentaries and things like that can come out that could really show, like, what the Asian community is about and different things like that. So I thought that was kind of cool. Sorry, I'll just show you guys my PowerPoint. Just so we can get a little more specific. So I did this PowerPoint on Japanese American culture. So I just thought it might be fun with the Japanese flag. So the Japanese immigrated here, and they first came to Hawaii, and they were provided work in plantations because there's a lot of plantations in Japan, and then obviously Hawaii. So discrimination actually didn't really start, like, you read about the Chinese discrimination, but it didn't really start for Japanese until World War II happened because it was Japan, and so a lot of people were rounded up immediately after Pearl Harbor and thrown into what they call internment camps, and they were just held there, or a lot of people were also just arrested, like thousands of people were arrested that didn't do anything, but because we felt it was a security threat, like, they just got arrested. We call this hypodescent when you associate anyone, like, when you associate one event with anyone. So, like, how it was Japan who attacked us, we associated the Japanese with that. Like, anyone who was Japanese American at that time with it. And so that was unfortunate. The internment camps were kind of like refugee camps in World War II. Nazi, sorry, lost it. And so here's some pictures of the discrimination that happened. And you can see people were less than thrilled and very harsh. And the Japanese American culture, like Japanese Americans, I guess, were really patient and really resilient while all this was going on. They didn't even get a public apology until about 50 years later, when Reagan was in office. He signed an official apology 50 years later. And, but they kept fighting for it, and they got it, so I just thought that was cool. And then some of the things that we'll see here in America that they brought over are, tea ceremonies, cherry blossom festivals from DC, so sushi, and ikebana, which is like floral arranging, and it's more of like a zen type thing. But that's just a little bit about the Asian American culture. Thanks for letting me teach you guys. It's been fun. Do you have any questions?
I don't think so.
Okay.